Welcome to Changemakers. I'm your host, Chris Riotta. In each episode, we'll be meeting people who are making historic differences while changing the world around them. We always hear about influencers, disruptors, thought leaders, whatever you want to call them. But how do they get there? And what's that journey like along the way? Our conversations will show the human side of these stories and shed light on how we can all become changemakers. Because change shouldn't be feared, it should be celebrated. Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning into our very first episode. I really want to call it a journey, but I know it's just a podcast and I'm not trying to be that lame. I'd like to introduce myself since we will be spending some time together on this journey. There, I said it. It's done, it's out the way. I'm a reporter who covers culture and politics, and I'm often talking to people who are at the center of major change. Most of the folks I talk to every day are just like you and me. You know, smart, beautiful, flawless. The best interviews I've ever done are with just everyday people who are making historic differences. And so that's why I wanted to make this podcast. I want to highlight the powerful stories rising from within our own communities, the stories of individuals who are striving for a better world, and I hopefully want to answer the question, what does it take for someone to truly become a changemaker? We'll be traveling the world together and speaking with changemakers from all walks of life, and I want to hear from you. So get connected on Facebook with Changemakers the podcast and on Twitter at ChangemakersPC. Also, feel free to sign up for the Changemakers newsletter on my website, chrisriotta.com, and you'll get each episode sent to your inbox once they come out. I promise, no spam. In honor of Pride Month, today's episode focuses on an upcoming Supreme Court decision that will have vast consequences for civil rights in America, specifically for the LGBTQ community. You've probably heard about this story in the news. A bakery called the Masterpiece Cake Shop refused to make a cake for a same-sex couple who were celebrating their wedding. That couple decided to take action, filing an official complaint with the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. The Supreme Court decided to weigh in on the case after it was appealed. Even President Donald Trump's administration has picked a side, sending a Justice Department lawyer to argue in support of the bakery during recent hearings. But before we get into the unavoidable impact that decision will have on equal access to public accommodation in the United States, I want you to meet Charlie Craig and David Mullins, the couple at the heart of this historic case. I called Charlie and Dave a few weeks before the upcoming decision to discuss their journey into change-making, and what made them decide that enough was enough.
If I stop you at any point, it's just because your voices sound a little bit similar, and I just want to make sure I'm differentiating who's who.
Yeah, we've gotten that before. So usually, this is Dave, by the way. Usually we try and say who's speaking before we do.
Okay, wonderful.
So 6 years ago now, Charlie and I were engaged to be married. We were really excited, and, like any couple, we had a ton of details to finalize, and one of which was getting the wedding cake. So on that day, we were actually really lucky because Charlie's mom was in town, and this was really going to be her one opportunity to be involved in planning the wedding. So our reception planner actually recommended Masterpiece Cake Shop to us, and so Charlie called, made an appointment, and the three of us all went in. So we all went in and we sat down with the owner, Jack Phillips, and Charlie was carrying a binder that was full of just ideas and concepts we'd pulled off the internet, but we never even got a chance to open it because as soon as we sat down, the owner asked us who the cake was for, and when we said it was for us, he told us that he would not make a cake for a same-sex wedding.
So, Charlie and Dave's interaction with Jack Phillips, who's the baker and owner of the Masterpiece Cake Shop, was just a few minutes long. But that day set off a chain of events that would create a national conversation about public accommodation in America. Do private business owners have the right to reject entire demographics of people based on their strongly held personal or religious beliefs? This question, which lies at the very center of the ongoing debate, has popped up quite a few times in American history. In 1960, typical students across the country came together and formed the SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Through the SNCC, the Civil Rights Sit-In movement was born. Teenagers across the country began sitting in restaurants and public spaces where they weren't welcome because of their skin color, demanding change and setting off a domino effect. Though you may not hear the term on a daily basis, public accommodation remains one of the most controversial topics across the country. And on a local level, states have sought to protect the LGBTQ community from discrimination at private businesses, along with other minority groups. In fact, Colorado, where Charlie and Dave walked into the Masterpiece Cake Shop, is one of those states, and actually has pretty tough laws in place to prevent the exact thing that took place that very day from happening. For Charlie and Dave, becoming changemakers meant supporting each other at every step of the process, and recognizing that their fight is not theirs alone. It's bigger than them. And they say that feeling of responsibility has helped carry them through the toughest moments.
This is Charlie. When our story went viral, there was also some other people that had been turned away from the same bakery that had reached out to us, and they're like, I had wished that I had done that. Filed a complaint, stood up for myself. And so, I felt like not only were we, absolutely standing up for ourselves, but we were honoring all of the other people across the country who have been discriminated against. And I feel throughout this journey we've really been able to get a strong conversation and dialogue going about what public accommodation is and what civil rights discrimination as far as gay rights go. Currently there's only basically half the states have these protections for gay people. But to answer part of your question earlier, which is sort of how are we getting through it all?
Right.
I think we have a lot of different ways of coping with this, and in the end, I really feel like it's given Dave and I a lot of strength, and we've grown as people, and we've grown as a couple, and we really have had to be there for each other and really work on our communication skills and our coping skills. And some days we wake up and we think, wow, this is really overwhelming and I don't know if I have the energy for this. And some day, but we suck it up and we do it anyways because we realize that, the importance of the case.
The reality is we've always approached this as a team. I don't think either one of us could have gone through this without the other one by our side. But when the story of what happened to us gained prominence, we heard from a lot of people just across the country and even around the world, just sending us messages to say that they thought the way we had been treated was wrong. And, when the time came, when this originally happened, we didn't even know there was a law in Colorado that protected us. We just assumed that what had happened to us was just something people could do to us. But through the course of this, we discovered that the law was there to protect us. And, when it came time to make that decision, we looked at each other and we really thought about it. And we're like, these people who were writing to us, they weren't just trying to support us. They were really supporting the idea that gay people should be able to go about their lives and just assume that, they can exist in the public sphere. So I would say that was one of the things that really inspired us to follow this through is, all these people had written to us, they were supporting the community as much as they were us. And we felt the best way we could repay what they were doing for us was to follow through with it.
For our purposes, it's really important to look at the first step Charlie and Dave took in this process, and to note that these were two individuals with a choice: stand up for themselves, or go buy a cake from another bakery and move on with their lives. That sentiment can be felt at the core of the arguments being made by the couple's biggest critics in the public. And while they admit that it may have been easier to go the other route, especially at a time when they should have been celebrating love and a new chapter in their lives, this was their decision, and there was no turning back.
Well, this is Dave. In all honesty, this all happened so fast. When this initially happened, for us, you're right, Dave. We could have, just taken this as a horrid experience and slunk away and just let it go. But, you know, we just felt that what happened to us was wrong. And, you know, now 6 years later, obviously, the case, we're now waiting to find out what the Supreme Court has to say about this issue. And, you know, I mean, weirdly enough, I feel like, you know, there are days when Charlie and I wake up and look at each other and are like, wow, this is really hard. This is a lot. But I don't think we've ever regretted following this through.
No, initially, and this is Charlie, you know, all we did is file a complaint with the Civil Rights Commission. We were like, you know, I feel like what happened to us was wrong, and, you know, we want him to change his policy. And that was all that we thought we were getting ourselves into, honestly. And then as the case progressed and kept getting bigger and bigger, and like, you know, 99% of the people were like, the Supreme Court is not going to take this case. And we had to wait 6 months last year. And like 3 times a week, we had to be, you know, on guard to see if the Supreme Court was going to take the case or not. So that was a crazy time. You know, we wake up every morning and it's like, well, are our lives going to change?
And then they did. For Charlie and Dave, everything changed the day the Supreme Court announced they would make a decision on the case. The justices actually made the announcement on the final day they had to say whether or not they'd be weighing in on the dispute. So there's basically 2 options the Supreme Court has at this point. Side with the Colorado Civil Rights Commission, which already concluded that the Masterpiece Cake Shop violated the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act, or side with Jack Phillips, who argues that the state's discrimination laws violate his First Amendment rights to the free exercise of his religion. There was an interesting moment during oral arguments at the Supreme Court over the dispute in December last year when Justice Elena Kagan asked what I thought to be a pretty astute question. This is according to the Legal Intelligencer, and I quote, "If a baker is allowed to refuse to bake a cake, would it not be true that makeup artists, hairstylists, tailors, caterers, florists, chefs, and the like could all refuse to provide services to same-sex couples planning their weddings?" Now, the Bakers' Council tried to distinguish his work as an artist, but the Intelligencer says Justice Kagan pushed back. She asked on which side of the line chefs, florists, hairstylists, tailors, and makeup artists would then fall. According to Phillips's position, he designs cakes as works of art that convey a message and is therefore engaged in speech, whereas neither a chef nor a tailor are engaged in the same sort of artistic creation. Justice Steve Breyer then reportedly jumped in, expressing concern that this position would, quote, undermine every civil rights law.
In the end, what this comes down to is this case is not about freedom of expression, and it's not about freedom of religion. It's about the right of LGBT people to be able to hold a job or go into a business open to the public or have their own housing and not worry that they're going to be turned away just for being who they are.
There's no denying the impact Charlie and Dave have already had on the national debate surrounding public accommodation. And win or lose, the couple tells me that getting their story out and pushing for change already feels like a victory that's been secured. And yet, they're still haunted by the trauma they endured that day just before their wedding. Now there lives a fear in both of them that occasionally pops up as they walk into a private business, that they'll be denied entry or refused service simply for showing affection towards each other or for revealing their sexuality. In an unusual move, the Trump administration got involved in their case, writing an amicus brief in support of the bakery, which essentially argues that Phillips is forced to vicariously partake in Charlie and Dave's wedding since his work requires a level of artistic expression. And when I read those words to Charlie, you can still hear the pain he must have felt at the Masterpiece Cake Shop.
When the Trump administration came out against us, I can't say it was shocking, really, but, you know, normally they don't step into the role of publicly stating stuff on Supreme Court issues, you know? Mm-hmm. And so for them to do that, I mean, it was really hard to process, and I mean, it was a very emotional day, and when they wrote their amicus brief to the Supreme Court, they were called they're not called the Trump administration, they're called the United States of America. So when you read that and you read, oh, the United States of America is against you, I don't really know if there's like words. There was just a lot of bad emotion. And to know that they came, you know, and they actually came and talked at the Supreme Court for the other side. And that was really, it was just, oh.
There are clearly enormous powers and vocal critics working to undermine Charlie and Dave's side of this case, but they're not fighting it alone. The couple has teamed up with lawyers at the American Civil Liberties Union, an organization that's brought massive attention to this dispute. And while they may not have the United States government on their side under Trump, 45 amicus briefs were penned by some of the world's largest private businesses and civil rights advocates alike, all supporting the nation's non-discrimination laws, from Amazon to Apple, as well as the National Education Association and the Center for Constitutional Rights. Even other everyday folks are contributing to their cause. You can find out how at opentoall.com.
This whole process of getting here is not something we did alone, working with the ACLU and just, like I said, through our experience of all the people who contacted us and whose stories we've heard about being denied services at businesses. I mean, literally any business you can imagine across the country, some LGBT person or many LGBT people have been turned away from them. So I don't think there's any way after this that we would not stay committed to working for the civil rights of our group.
Yeah, that's been one of the great parts about this whole thing is meeting all of these great civil rights activists and lawyers and the ACLU and, and we've formed a lot of friendships with these people that are going to go well beyond the decision day.
Before all of this, Charlie and Dave never would have expected to land at the heart of a major Supreme Court case. The moment they were launched into changemaking should have been the epic beginning to an entirely different episode of their lives together. They were never striving for recognition on the national stage by filing a civil rights complaint in Colorado, or trying to take on the Trump administration and become faces for the resistance. These aren't actors, and this isn't a political stunt. This is about an office manager and an interior designer who fell in love and wanted to eat their cake. But when they think about the impact their fight will have for future generations, they're reminded why they stepped into the ring in the first place, and why they don't plan on stopping their mission in changemaking.
Well, I think people need to realize that a loss at the Supreme Court could have effects, wide-ranging effects, and not just effects on LGBT people. Because if a business owner is allowed to decide who they serve based on their strongly held beliefs, could a hotel owner refuse to rent a room to an interracial couple because they believe that the races are not meant to mix? Or could a business owner refuse to hire a single mother because they believe that women are supposed to be married if they have children? A loss at the Supreme Court could have incredibly wide-ranging effects on all discriminated against groups in our society.
Mm-hmm. So, are you nervous?
This is Charlie. So, very nervous.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to find out in the next 6 weeks what the Supreme Court decides. And, there's a lot at stake. And like I said earlier, over half the states don't even have protections currently for the LGBTQ community. And so this is really going to set the tone to whether or not that's okay.